Thank you. I want to thank John for putting me in this time slot after we have a nice big Thanksgiving meal. Everybody's sitting down, ready to fall asleep. So you'll look like most of my students. No. But no, it's very good to be here today. And really, in many senses, this conference will be a follow-up to John's from this morning. Because he talked to us about the dangers of modernism, the false principles of modernism, and what I'm going to talk about is the real danger it poses for Catholic action. So for people that are working to rebuild the city of God, and in actually a book that John interviewed me about recently that's just come out by Angelico Press that I've written, To Build the City of God, I didn't just stop there, I said, in a secular age. Because we're doing this work of rebuilding church and civil society in an age surrounded by secularism, liberalism, and modernism. And it's the danger in its essence is we sort of sit here, oh, Father Dupuy, oh yeah, Casper, oh yeah, look at those modernists, they're horrible, yeah. But their ideas have penetrated everything around us. And their ideas seep into the way we think and speak without our even knowing it. If any of you have heard the excellent conferences that Father Juan Carlos Ciscara gives on church history, when he talks about the period after the French Revolution, some people are very upset because he says, we're all tainted by liberalism. We're all tainted by liberalism. Now, he doesn't mean we're all culpable liberals. What he means is, even if we're fighting for the right causes, we have the right intentions, we're doing all the right things, we just can't help that everything we see, everything we hear, everything that surrounds us is liberal, modernist principles, and we're all tainted with it. Again, we're not liberals, we're not modernists, but we have to be on guard because these ideas are so prevalent in our secular age that they can actually creep into fighting for good causes. And we have to be careful because that's how, in a certain sense, we could be helping our enemies. Because even if we're fighting for a good cause, the consecration of Russia, ending abortion, the freedom of the traditional Mass in its proper place, if we're doing them using arguments and language and philosophical principles of modernists, in the end, we're actually promoting modernist ways of thinking, even if it's for a good cause. And that's really the essence of what we're going to talk about. What are some of these core foundational principles that can creep up, that could allow us to do what the enemies of the church was stated as their goal? John Salza can tell you even in more detail, but essentially in the late 19th, early 20th century, the Masons were blunt about this. They said, we don't want a pope that's a Mason. We don't need bishops that are Masons. We just need people that are using our principles. And they said, what we want is people who are marching behind the banner of the papacy, thinking that they're advancing the interests of the church, but are really advancing our principles. That was their goal over 100 years ago. And they've succeeded dramatically, because you'll even find this, again, among very good, well-intentioned people, fighting for good causes, good Catholic causes, but they've adopted the mode of argument, the mode of thought of the modernists. And I should say we all can fall into this very, very easily. So it's a very practical conference. So we're going to talk about sort of very practical things, but that will lead us to some very important philosophical principles that are at stake in the way we do things. Now, lest you think this is just theoretical, though this is the theoretical danger, it's a danger that is proven by history that actually can happen. I'm going to tell you very briefly the story of the Sillon in France. It's a much longer story than I will tell you. I think John, at his CDs, I think he has a CD on the Sillon, if I remember right. I think I've listened to one that he has from one of a past conference. But I'll just give you the essence of it. Essentially, it was a group of French young people, a university professor, who read the social teaching of the church, Pope Leo XIII, and got all excited about it. This is good. We want to advance the teaching of the church. Very good cause, obviously, good intention. But what happened? They were not well grounded in philosophical principles. And so they started fighting for Catholic principles, but they ended up fighting against the church, to the point where in the document Notre Charge Apostolique, Pope St. Pius X had to condemn the Sion and forbid Catholics to be involved. So what started for the good cause, good intentions, because the philosophy wasn't right, because the principles weren't sound underlying the goals, they ended in disaster. And here's what the Pope says. He says, the Sion, its leaders were young, full of enthusiasm and self-confidence, but they were not adequately equipped with historical knowledge, sound philosophy, and solid theology to tackle, without danger, the difficulty of social problems in which the work and their inclinations were involving them. They were not sufficiently equipped to be on their guard against the penetration of liberal and Protestant concepts on doctrine and obedience. And that's the danger of fighting on the enemy's terms, fighting for the right cause, but from the wrong philosophical premises. Pope Leo XIII in his writings told us that every problem in the modern world starts with a philosophical problem. Bad philosophy begets bad theology, begets bad politics, begets a bad social life, begets bad doctrine. Everything comes from it. So we're going to look at 6 general categories of these errors that we can all fall into, and we have to constantly be on guard against. So the first of these picks up very nicely from John's talk this morning. It's the error of the modernists, right? That truth is somehow always changing or is capable of change. And the error that we can fall into is when we speak about these issues of truth to use the language of opinion as opposed to the language of reality. So what do I mean by that? The truth is something independent of us. It exists separate from us. Right? So that's a door. It's irrelevant whether I think it's a door or not. It's still a door. Right? I could have the opinion. I could say, well, I think that's a window. It wouldn't change the reality. So when we're talking about reality, about truths, we don't use language of opinion or beliefs or language of uncertainty, because that suggests that truth, first of all, may or may not be what it is, and that it's capable of change. So I think that's a window because it used to be a window, but now it's changing. I think it may be changing. Right? So we don't want to fall into that language. Where does the language of opinion actually have a proper place? Well, remember, John talked about inductive reasoning. And he's absolutely right. The danger is theology is not an inductive discipline, because theology is about divine revelation that's a given, and then we deductively reason from it. But there are times in our experience when we do use inductive reasoning, right? But it's a very different type of reasoning that often calls for use of opinion. So what is inductive reasoning? It's when we look at examples and we attempt to abstract from that patterns, to make predictions. Right? And so we're not dealing with a given reality. A dogmatic truth is revealed and then we reason from it. We're trying to figure out a pattern that hasn't been shown to us. So it doesn't apply to theology. So it's some knowledge we're trying to discover. We do it through induction. So again, real simple example, predicting the weather. Right? So we make observations. We see that every time it seems the wind changes, it's going to rain. Right? It seems like that happens. So we say the last 7 out of the 8 times, it rained after the wind changed. So in my opinion, I believe it's going to rain next. Now that's an appropriate use of it because inductive reasoning is not without fail. Right? Deductive reasoning, if the premises are sound, if your mode of argument is correct, the conclusion must be true. There's no doubt about it. Because you have started from a truth, as long as you've used proper principles of logic, you must arrive at the truth. Inductive reason is not as certain when you reason inductively, because you're looking at examples and you can't see the whole picture. Right? So 7 out of 8 times it rains. That means sometimes it doesn't. So you can say, I predict, my opinion, I believe it's going to rain, because the evidence suggests that, but it doesn't prove it. Right? Again, easy example where you can see this is the case. So you happen to meet 7 people that are converts, and they're all women. You say, oh, convert, woman, convert. I believe all converts are women. Well, you'd be wrong, right? But it's because your inductive reasoning depends on the more data, the more certitude you get, but it never can be complete because you're not starting from a given truth. So when we're talking about things that we are merely trying to come to knowledge about patterns that may or may not, we may or may not have moral certainty about, we can use the language of opinion. But what have the modernists done? They've taken that proper use of that language and transferred it to the realm of truth, things that are given, that are knowns, and they want to attach that language to it to suggest this is just like predicting the weather. It might be true, most cases, not all the time, could fail. This could fail, right? My statement, it should rain every time the wind changes, could fail. It's capable of failure. It's not 100% certain. But they want to use that language about certain other things, right? So how can we fall into this? Have a discussion with someone. Well, they say, in my opinion, a woman has a right to choose whether to have an abortion or not. And instead of saying, well, no, a woman doesn't have the right to that opinion because it is intrinsically wrong. There's no doubt about it. There's no uncertainty about it, right? And therefore, we shouldn't respond, well, in my opinion, abortion's wrong. Right? You see how it's very easy? Well, in my opinion, abortion's wrong, and therefore we shouldn't allow it. Or, a little even more subtle, the church believes that abortion is wrong. Well, that's not why abortion's wrong. It's not really because, that's not a causation. It's not because the church believes, and if the church believes something else, abortion would be right. No, the church believes abortion's wrong because it's wrong. So you see the importance, if you introduce this language, you introduce an element of uncertainty. Right? Again, the three examples I said I'll often try to give from the traditional Mass. Right? Well, I believe the traditional Mass is a better expression of the Catholic faith, contains the Catholic faith, or in my opinion, right? Or I prefer the traditional Mass. No, I mean the answer is what is right and what is wrong. What has the Church taught? And as Father talked last night from the Council of Trent as an example, right, about this Mass, it's for all time. And so, frankly, it doesn't really matter what I think in my opinion, right, or what my preference is. What is acceptable to God? In what way does God ask to be worshipped? Not what I prefer or what I think is better. But often again, well, I believe or I think in my experience. No, when we're talking about things that are either are not correct or true, we have to use the language of being, of is, of existence, not of contingency, of subjectivism. Same thing, consecration of Russia. Well, I believe the Pope should consecrate Russia. Or in my opinion, the Pope should consecrate Russia. No. Right? Our Lady, who can speak no falsehood, nothing contrary to the truth, right, says this must be done. She gives a command. She gives an order. Right? A command is the language Sister Lucy uses. Really, she gives a law to the Church. So it really doesn't matter if, in my opinion, the Pope should do anything. He should do it. Right? Again, this is how we can subtly add doubt to absolute truth, by using this language of subjectivity, of opinion, of rather than reflecting what reality is in its very nature. So that's the first danger, using the language of opinion and subjectivity as opposed to objectivity, right, of what correct things are. Again, I've just picked these three examples to talk about, but it applies to really any good Catholic cause. Okay, second danger, and this also comes from modernism, and this is the danger of using emotion rather than reason. Now, modernism, we've talked about, their chief tenet is that truth changes, dogma changes. Their second angle is an error that emerged in the 19th century of immanence, right? So that God is not a being who is there, who has revealed himself to us, to whom we must orient ourselves, right? So we are separated from God. God has revealed himself to us and called us to come to him. So we need to turn away from sin, to convert, to turn away from sin and turn towards him, right? No, the modernist says. God is not there. He's in everything. It's actually a form of paganism. Naturalism, right? That God is immanent in all of our experiences. So we don't come to know God through his nature, through the truths he tells us about himself. So we don't start, this is again back to John's conference, we don't start with the truths God tells us about himself. We start with our experience. What did I feel? well, I feel that God has told me this, or I feel that this is what I experienced. Right? We do experience God. God is a personal God. But we approach him through who he is, through his nature and what he's revealed. Then we come to know him, right? Remember your catechism? Know, love, and serve God? Know comes first. You can't experience what you don't know. So we only experience God when we know him. If you think about the way the great saints have taught us to meditate, right? Meditation is not the modern version of mental prayer, of meditation. Oh, let me just sit here and, oh man, I feel really, wow, I'm feeling really, wow, I feel it. Do you feel it? No, that's going to lead you nowhere, right? How do you meditation? You work the intellect, you meditate on a truth, so you take a divine truth. God is the principle of all being. And you use your intellect, you use your imagination, you think about it, you examine it, and through that you move your will to make acts towards God. Right? So you start with truth. You contemplate, and the contemplation is to go around something, to look at it from all these different angles. And through that, you come to know God. Immanence starts the other way around. Oh, what do you feel? How have you experienced God? It's this error that turned into personalism of Jacques Maritain and of phenomenology, that God is in our experience, this vital experience, and then we extract from that truths about God. Now we know what God is because we felt him. Right? This is this danger that is the core of modernism, that we meet God through this personal experience. This is why this false experiencing God that comes from Protestantism, right? People getting up, babbling in tongues, and all this. Now I come to know God. No, that's not the way we come to know God. We come to know him through the truth. The reason for that is God gave us different faculties of the soul. Right? So we have the intellect, which is oriented towards reason, towards knowing, towards truth. The will, which is oriented towards action, towards election, right? And towards doing something, towards action, right? To move us to do something. And then we have the passions, the appetites. And they are oriented to assist this connection between the reason and the will. Right? So they are meant to be subject to reason. So reason says this is good. Right? So this glass of water. My intellect says you're very thirsty. This will satisfy that natural need. Therefore, this is a good. Right? My will then says, okay, that's a good. I should take a drink. The emotions, the appetites, are meant to prompt that. So I have this sensation, right? This desire within me for it that supports what the intellect is directing the will towards, to action, to drinking that which is good. So as God created these faculties in the Garden of Eden, they were subject to reason. So, and again, I'm simplifying this because we're only talking about the concupiscible appetite here in terms of desire, but it was meant to be subject to reason. So we would only have an attraction and an appetite directing us towards that which reason said was good. And that was meant to support the will's movement towards it. That's how God designed us. Adam blew it, right? One of the consequences is that our appetites broke away from reason, right? Remember, there was everything in the garden, everything as God created was ordered. So Eve was perfectly subject to Adam and peaceable about it, but that order got broken, right? Same thing with our appetite, right? They are no longer subject to reason, right? It's why our Lord, who did not suffer this defect of original sin, had perfect control of his appetites. His irascible appetite is anger. When he saw the moneylenders, his reason says that is incorrect. They are violating, they're defaming a sacred place. His anger was proportional to his reason. And when he had been moved to action to cleanse the temple, he was no longer angry because his appetites obeyed his reason. We, thanks to Adam, don't have that. Our appetites are without a compass. They just float around looking for something to attach to. Right? I want to hold on to something, or I want to desire something. Whatever I see or whatever my senses bring in, they'll latch on to, because one of the effects of original sin. And so we have to struggle to remember those feelings, those appetites have to be subjected to reason. When we feel, what we feel may not be what's right. If we're back the way we're supposed to be, it would be an aid to reason. It would say, this is reasonable, my appetites are attracted to it, my will is moved towards it. But we can't trust our appetites or our emotions because they've been disconnected from reason. But the modernists say that's where we find God. We don't find him in reason, so we know God, now we should, as through acts of the will, direct our appetites towards him. We should desire God, we should hold on to him even when it's difficult, because our will should move our appetites to where our reason tells it. They say, no, we follow our appetites. If it feels right, it feels good, therefore it must be good. Again, this is the errors preached about these deviant acts. Well, these people have an orientation towards it. Their appetites are directing them there. So God must be leading them, because where's God? He's in what we experience, what we feel. If we feel it, God must have put it there, because he's in there. This is the error. So again, how can we fall into it? We can fall into it by not arguing to reason. Try to argue to the appetites. And why is it easy to do that? Because they're easier to persuade. Remember, they're like a sail on a ship that's been cut loose and flapping in the breeze. They're not directed. The sail that's tied down is directed. So they're easy to grab and redirect. Right? The advertising industry knows this really well. That's why they're so successful. They know we can easily flash images in front of you. Flash, pictures of McDonald's hamburgers. And, you get hungry because you see them. Your appetite latches onto them. Right? So it's easy to argue to the emotion, but what does that do? That reinforces this experience. If you feel it's right, it is right, as opposed to directing your feelings towards reason. So what are some examples of this? Again, in the abortion context, appeals to emotion. Right? And again, it's not that there are not places for showing images, because sometimes that's a part of reason. Right? Someone says, well, I don't think that's a baby. Well, let me show you a picture. That obviously is a baby. Your senses are giving you data which indicates this is true. But it's when sort of, look at the cute little baby. You wouldn't want to do something horrible to this. Oh, wouldn't that make you feel bad? Right? You're arguing to emotion. And so what the problem with that is they, I feel that way. Oh, it feels so cute. I would never do that. But then when it gets hard and their emotions are saying, I'm 17, the father's nowhere to be seen, I want to go to college, I really don't feel any attraction toward that baby anymore. You haven't convinced their reason, and their appetite then goes somewhere else. Same thing, traditional Mass. Oh, you should come to the church. It's so beautiful. The music is beautiful. It will make you feel good. You'll come out of it, and you'll feel all close to God. No, right? Again, the traditional Mass is not superior because it makes people feel better, or because it makes you feel more religious, or because it has a calm silence. And those things can be true, but ultimately it's more pleasing to God. That's why it's right. Again, there's a story a priest once told me. He went over to France to visit a monastery that only has the traditional liturgy. And he stopped on his way back in a place, I won't say where, in England, and there were some priests there who were New Rite priests. They said, oh, yeah, you were over in that monastery over there. Yeah, those monks, boy, they just love that Latin stuff. Like, makes them feel good. They love, that Latin, all that stuff. The smell of incense makes them feel good. He said, actually, I don't think you really understand them at all. He said, they don't feel good getting up in the middle of the night to sing matins every night. They don't just, wow, this is great. I feel so good. I just woke up after going to bed 3 hours ago, and sometimes it's really dull and boring, and their mind's wandering, and they're fighting distractions. They don't do it because it makes them feel good. They do it because they know it pleases Almighty God. And that's the crux of the issue, right? It's like, again, I prefer the traditional Mass. It makes me feel good. Well, if you get somebody to go because it makes them feel good, sometime they're not going to feel good. They're going to be in a time of desolation. The devil will be attacking them, and they're going to feel dry. They're going to, this doesn't make me feel good anymore. Well, you know what? I hear they have a big hootenanny going on over there where they're going to have a clown, handing out balloons, and maybe that'll cheer me up and make me feel good, so I'll go do that. Right? If you're convincing someone to go because of how it makes them feel, you're not addressing the reason. You're not addressing the intellect. You're not addressing the truth. Again, the same thing we could fall into in arguing for the message of Fatima, right? For honoring our Lady's command. Well, we need to do, if it's purely from this approach, we better do this. World War III's coming. We're all going to die. You're going to be starving. It's going to happen like next week. You better do this real quick. Folks, aren't you scared yet? We're not actually advancing the message of Fatima. The message of Fatima is not, quick, do the consecration of Russia because you're so afraid of the consequence. She tells us about the consequence because it's a reality, it's truth. But you should do it because she asked. Right? You should do it because she's your mother. And she said, you should do this. And so again, there's nothing wrong with telling the consequences. Our Lady does predict nations will be annihilated. There'll be this great crisis in the church. They're all meant to prove the reality. She makes a prediction. If you don't do it, these things will happen to help us see the reality. But if we purely make the message on the emotional level, right, out of fear, you should do this out of fear, we again run that danger. Well, you know what? I was actually, I'll tell you, this happened with somebody in my family who grew up in the 50s and 60s when message of Fatima was very much talked about, more in the Catholic world than today. She said, we were afraid the Russians were going to invade any moment. We had to have the secret revealed. We had the consecration. And we were really afraid. That's all we knew is we had to do it because we were afraid. And it kind of never happened. And maybe it was all just, I got bored with it. And now thinks Fatima is just worthless relative to my family. It's because it was purely on the emotional level. Again, we are creatures of emotion, of appetites. We have to address them, but it always has to be oriented to the intellect, oriented to the reason, to the reality. And so ultimately, we don't want the consecration of Russia because we're afraid, right? Our appetite should be afraid because we know in reality we're not obeying what Our Lady wants and we're displeasing her and her divine Son. But we want it because that's the reason, because she and her divine Son will it and have commanded it. And so it's important that we are careful in the way we make these arguments, that we don't lead people down that way, because the emotions are going to fail you. They will direct you in a wrong direction. Even if you get some little victory, you may lose the war. And make the modernists happy, because that's where they want everything to live, in this world of what you experience is what's right. And as John explained to us, that's exactly what they did in the Synod. Bring in this couple from Sydney, talk about how they're felt and how their life of 57 years and all these sordid experiences. That's not what marriage is about, right? Marriage is not about the appetites primarily. The primary purpose of marriage, right, is the begetting and rearing of children, which is a life of sacrifice and a life, right, that is not purely about what you feel, what your appetites tell you would feel good at the moment. What that feeling gets you to is what the Synod's trying to promote. Well, I feel good with this person right now, but that didn't work out, so now I've got a stable feeling with this person. As long as those feelings are stable, then that should be okay. So again, that's the danger if we fall into that error. So the next one, the third one, is accepting the liberal minimalist view of society. And that's very much what this book is about, right? That the liberal error is that society is a little minimalist thing. And what is the minimalist thing of society? It's essentially the error of a false philosopher, Thomas Hobbes. His idea is all that public life is about is avoiding harm, right? Preventing people from hurting each other. Right? That's the most we can hope for. What's the purpose of government? Stop us from hurting each other. We had this horrible state of nature that he made up, fantasy, right? That to stop us from falling into this war against all against all, we need government to stop harm. And our error in arguing for truths is we can adopt that view of public life, that our life as social and political animals is merely to prevent hurting each other. As opposed to, what is the real goal? Well, it is to build the city of God. It's the social reign of Christ the King. That we are social beings. We can only attain our natural and supernatural ends together. Right? Again, unlike Protestant error, here's the Protestant errors creep in. Protestantism is all about me and God. Right? I'm here, God's there, I make an act of faith, he saves me, I'm done. And then, if I want to feel good, I go to have some fellowship with some other people who are also saved. And we feel good and have, bake sales. But primarily, it's all about me and God. It's the one-on-one individual to God. The Catholic view is no. You are not saved off by yourself. As John Salza is writing an excellent series on who's a member of the church, To be saved, we must be visibly incorporated into the church. We cannot be saved on our own. We must be saved in and through the church. And so the purpose of society is linked to our very individual well-being. And what the end of society is the common good, which is the reign of Christ the King in all aspects of our life. But the liberal error is, again, this minimalist individual and direct link. So it's the individual and government, and their only relationship is the government to keep other individuals from hurting other individuals. And so the harm principle. So how does this translate into errors in these examples? Well, a focus on abortion discussions that are just on it's killing this baby, which it is true. That's true. It is doing that, and that's wrong. So it's doing harm to this baby. And then get into arguments, is this a baby? Yes, it is. No, it's not. And they deny reality, deny what's obvious to a 5-year-old child looking at this as a baby. But we get bogged down in that. Well, you're just doing harm. There's actually greater realities there. The greatest issues with abortion go much beyond that. Number one, the person procuring it or seeking its procurement is committing a mortal sin, is condemning themselves if they don't repent and have a firm purpose of amendment to hell for all eternity, right? Is usurping the place of God. God is master of life and saying, God, I'm going to be you and I'm going to decide. Right? It is doing harm to the other individual, but the root of it is pride. I will decide who lives and who dies. Secondly, it's frustrating the purpose of God because it's denying baptism, eternal life, the beatific vision, to another person. So it's not just physical natural harm, which is the liberal principle. Because again, it's by harm that's very narrow. It's killing, beating up, hurting, maybe stealing, maybe, in their very narrow view. But ours, this communion of saints is reduced by one when this life is ended before it's had a chance to enter the church. And in fact, reduced by at least 3, the mother, the doctor, and the baby, right? So we lose sight of these greater purposes, these greater problems, because we're just focused on just don't kill each other. That's all that we can do. That's all we can talk about. And don't talk about that going to hell stuff, because we're trying to stop abortion, and that's not the role of the government, and that's private religious belief. And so we sweep under the rug the big issues for the only one that's acceptable to talk about, the harm principle. And so again, get me wrong, I'm not saying we don't say that it's wrong because you're killing a baby. That's obviously true. But if our focus is completely there, and we say, we'll just not talk about these other things, it's giving in, conceding the liberal view of what's right and what's wrong. All that we really can talk about in social context is as long as you're not killing people, that's it. But there are greater harms, right? What did our Lord tell us? Right? Fear more he who can kill both body and soul, not just he who can kill the body. Referring to the devil who can cast you into kill the soul in the sense of casting it into eternal fire. That's a much greater consequence of abortion. And we can't not talk about that and just focus on the harm principle. Okay, the next error is accepting evolution in principle and its expression through the Whig view of history. So how does this play out in the way we can fall into it? What's the Whig view of history? It essentially is a precursor of biological evolution. It was the English conservatives, they were the liberals who became the conservatives in the strange world post the Age of Faith. So the Whigs were actually the liberals, but when we look back, we think they're the conservatives. They said, basically, history is on this inevitable march towards perfection, and whatever is right. History is unfolding in this evolutionary path, and therefore, they were English. The Revolution of 1688 is the triumph of history because it's this greatest point that all's been moving towards. This spirit got sent to America and became manifest destiny, became America the last great hope of the world. Right? We've got to make the world safe for democracy. We are riding the tide of history towards its inevitable greatness. What is Catholic view of history? Not at all. God started off history at its end, its perfection, right? Naturally. We were meant to go to a supernatural end, but we started at the Garden of Eden, perfect natural happiness. We fell, right? We made some attempts to recover from that fall. We fell again, right? Wipes out the world with Noah. God comes, he helps the ancient Israel to come back up. We get sort of a high point, makes a covenant with them. They worship the golden calf. They fall again, right? Things get back a little better. A constant cycle through history, right? Christ comes, the church builds up to the point of its height in the age of faith. The Reformation, nominalism come, history falls back into barbarism. Right? This is the reality of history. Why? Because God has a divine and a permissive will. God's permissive will allows for the input of our free will. So he allows history. He ultimately, the divine will bring history to where it needs to be. It will end as he's told us it will. But in the course of that, he allows ups and downs because of free will. What we do matters. So what the liberals want to do is, well, whatever we've evolved to, that's great. That's what we're supposed to do. We're evolving better. We're better than the past. History's on this upward trajectory. What was the point of the sit-ins, right? Look around. Look at all these divorced people. This is the way the world's moving. It must be right this way, because this is the way it's moving. Everybody's going this way. Everybody's doing it. This is the evolving nature of history. And we don't want to fall into thinking that, of losing that sense of our personal responsibility, right, for the way that God grants to us. Our actions will matter. If you remember in the gospel, the episode when the apostles are out and they're not catching anything, and through divine power, Christ can make their catch. But he doesn't just say, fish. I'm going to create fish in the boats and they appear. What does he do? He says, cast your nets out again. And he performs the miracle because they cooperate with him, because they cast the nets out. Right? Peter says, we've been out all night, we didn't catch anything, but because you said it, we'll do it. And history's changed. Right? The loaves and the fishes. He doesn't just say, everybody has some bread, and they have it. He could have done that. He wants our cooperation. Bring me what you have, and I will work a miracle. So we have to remember that history is not on some inevitable course, not talk about just because this is the way things are going, and not implicate that in the way we argue or the way we talk. Right? So, again, look at some of our examples. The consecration of Russia. Well, Our Lady will just do this. She will make it happen. She said, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. Therefore it will. We shouldn't really worry about it. If we emphasize that too much without explaining our part, or, it's just the Pope delaying it. Our Lady will work it out. If the consecration of Russia has not happened, it's because we have not made prayers and sacrifices enough. Right? Our cooperation is needed to be part of it. We have to continually emphasize that. Also, an acceptance of the way things are. Right? Well, Pope hasn't consecrated Russia. God wants to chastise the world. He's allowing this. He's allowing it. That's correct through his permissive will, but he doesn't. That's not what he wills in his divine will. He's permitting it. So we shouldn't just be accepting of it. Again, when it comes to the true Mass. Right? Well, I prefer, you see how these all come together. I prefer the traditional Mass, makes me feel better, but I can't say the new Mass is evil. Why? Because, the Church allows it. It's there. I don't prefer it, but it must be okay because the Church allows it. No. Right? We're letting that sort of mentality, because it's there, it must be right, creep in, right? Even when we're resisting something. So we have to be on guard against that, to realize that God does allow great breadth within the bounds of history, which he's determined, which are a result directly of our consequences. Running a little short on time, so let me jump to the next error, the majoritarian fallacy. Great fallacy of liberalism. What is it? If we take a vote, whatever the majority decide must be right. It's this free marketplace of ideas. Truth will always win out if you've got an even playing field. So if everybody's able to express their open opinion, truth will emerge when we take a vote. Right? Notice with the Synod, how Pope Francis opened the Synod. Open and free discussion, which, by the way, will be behind doors and will be, for the first time in history, not reported and will be kept secret. But the impression was, this is all open discussion. And then we'll take a vote, and it will all emerge the way it's supposed to. Right? Truth is not subject to a vote. Again, it's independent of us. This is very basic. What did your mother tell you when you were little? I don't care if all the little kids, jump off a bridge. It doesn't make it right. You don't do it, right? But this error has fallen into our way of thinking. We have to get majorities, and we get enough people to vote, and, look at the statistics. 50% of Americans now are opposed to this. That doesn't make it right or wrong, right? We want people to be opposed to abortion because it's wrong. We don't want to say, you should get with the bandwagon here because this is the way the majority's going. And this is how even conservative, even Catholics who oppose abortion fall into this. Sadly, Justice Anthony Scalia of our own Supreme Court here in America, in several cases, abortion cases, in the Defense of Marriage Act case, the Windsor case on gay unions, he says, I wouldn't do what the majority's doing, the majority of the court. I dissent from that. Not because this is an intrinsically evil act, not because abortion is against the divine and natural law, but because I think the decision should be left to the majority vote of the citizens. And that's what the conservative Catholic position has been reduced to. Put it to a vote. Let's play on their terms. Right? Let's go into the Estates General and we'll fight them. We'll get more votes. Rather than this is all wrong. Right? We can't do this. But we can easily fall into that, right? We've got numbers on our side. And notice the dangers it can fall into. With abortion, we focus on certain cases. So you see, more than 50% of Americans are opposed to late-term abortions. So let's focus our attention there, because we can get the majority there, right? And not talk about the things that we don't have a majority for. Let's build majorities. Let's vote for this politician who advocates these horrible things, but he says he's pro-life, right? Because we're trying to get the majority vote. Let's get everybody together. And if we focus our attention on that the will of the majority means nothing, cannot change reality, right? If the majority voted, they pass a law saying that abortion is right or that it doesn't change reality, right? Again, look at the fight for the mass, right? The danger. How many people were at mass? There's 700 people there. Wow, there's 7. Look, let's put it on a Radicelli. There's 800 people who came to this mass. Look at this must be right. No. That doesn't make it right. It's not because more people are coming. Because what's the danger of that? We want to pack the pews because we want to say to the Vatican, hey, there's 10,000 people that are going to this. So, they're coming, they like this. But if I talk about extra ecclesiam nulla salus, they might get upset and leave. Or if I mention that there are dangerous ambiguities in Vatican II, people might get a little shaken by that and they might leave, and we'll lose the numbers, right? A focus on the numbers. The danger of the majoritarian fallacy is we've got to convince more people, and then we temper our arguments to please the majority, right? We have to be willing to say the truth is the truth, and I don't care. There's a little kiddie movie, a cute little kiddie movie my children have watched on St. Nicholas. And it's a very simplified version of the story for children, but there's this really interesting thing at the end. He's in prison, and when the Edict of Milan comes out, Nicholas gets out of prison, and he runs into his nemesis, this mean, the mean, bad, nasty Roman military leader who had been persecuting him, put him in prison, and he runs, he says, Nicholas, you're the last Christian left. They all gave up while you were in prison. He's trying to demoralize him. And he walks out of the prison, and he says, Lord, I don't care if I'm the last Christian left. You're still God, it's still right. And that's the attitude we have to have. I don't really care if 90% of Americans think abortion is right. I care in the sense that they're in error, and for their own good, I'd like to persuade them that it's better for them to be with the truth, but that's not a factor in whether it's right or wrong. I don't care that 99% of the church goes to the new right. It's displeasing to God. That's what I care about. And so we have to not fall into this, our numbers are big, how can we get our numbers bigger? And focus on that as an end, because that doesn't change reality. Right? So again, if we're gathering, why do we gather, say, petitions or appeals on the consecration of Russia? It's to do what the church in canon law tells us we have a right and sometimes a duty to do. When our pastors are off the ship, to point out to them in respect and in charity, But it's not, well, look, there are 10,000 signatures, you better consecrate Russia. No, you should consecrate Russia because the only vote that matters told you to do it. It doesn't matter. Again, John Paul II was afraid that bishops would go into schism and leave the church if he called for the consecration of Russia. Well, it'd be a lot easier to get all the bishops of the world there then. So they all leave the church, and the ones that are left are all the bishops in the church, and we've just fulfilled the request. Right? It's not about how many people are in favor, who will vote for this. It's about what's right or what's wrong. And we don't want to let ourselves fall into the error of thinking about that. It's very easy. On the natural level, Humphrey, the example John told, right? The soldier, we're on the winning side. We want to be on the winning side. It makes us feel good, right? It's hard to be on the losing, quote, losing side. But we're thinking about winning and losing wrong, right? Our Lord was on the winning side. And there was, probably 4 people there. Himself, his mother, Mary Magdalene, and 1 apostle. He was on the winning side. But from a majoritarian fallacy perspective, he was on the losing side. The entire Jewish community voted against him. So we have to be careful of falling into this, because the liberal belief is if the majority votes for it, it must be right. Again, look at the Synod. This is what the people want. They don't believe, what was they say? The studies we did, the majority of Catholics reject the Catholic teaching on marriage. So rather than saying, whoa, we've really not done our job here, I guess we better go teach them, well, we have to change what we're teaching because they don't accept it. Right? It was the time of the 60s on contraception. People don't believe it, the Pope shouldn't reaffirm it. What? That's exactly the time to reaffirm it when the majority of the people don't accept it. Right? But we fall into this pattern of accepting what the majority of people are in favor of. Finally, the last error we can fall into is related to the majoritarian fallacy. You can see how these all build on each other. Is ignoring the truth to build consensus. So it's an error related to that. So we have to build up majorities. And so what do we have to do? We have to kind of obscure and hide the truth so that we can get a majority. So think about the abortion context. Well, if we want to get enough people to vote this way and say we're a majority, there's this Protestant group. And they're kind of opposed to abortion, right? Sort of, most cases. But if we mention contraception, which is this linked sin, I mean, they're the same sin. I will decide who lives and who dies. It's a moment of temporality when I make that decision implemented. There's a matter of gravity between them, but they're really the same root. But, if we talk about contraception, the Protestants are going to run out of our rally. They're not going to come to our pro-life meeting because they have accepted that since 1930. So let's just not talk about that. And we end up destroying ourselves because we don't talk about the root of the problem. We go back to the harm principle. Oh, it's killing a baby, that's it. Because we're trying to keep our consensus together, right? Same thing, right? Well, we're trying to get people in the diocese to cooperate with us, so, let's just say how good the Mass is, and we won't talk about the errors against the faith in the new Mass, because that, they'll kind of not stay on board. Or let's not talk about Vatican II. Let's not talk about the consecration of Russia, because that's controversial. And we need to get a bigger group so the bishop will give us a traditional Mass. So let's just keep that stuff quiet. So we start obscuring the truth, remain quiet on things so as to build a consensus. Right? It's what's happened to the popular Fatima crusades, the ones that are popular. Right? Talking about the third secret, that's controversial, people get upset, so we're just not going to talk about that anymore. Right? We'll just focus on do prayer and penance, which is good. I mean, that's actually a good message, right? That is part of the message of Fatima, but remain silent about part of it because we'll lose people. Right? So the danger of accepting the majoritarian principle, being so focused on building consensus, is to obscure truth. I mean, this was, maybe John and I differ on this because I know he has a different view of it. This, to my, was the original sin of Vatican II. We need to get along with the world. We need, in this world of, and I think there's an understandable feeling. It was the height of communism, height of persecution going on, dangerous world. We need to build, just coming out of the Second World War, massive destruction. We need to build peace among men. And we need to find some people that are not too bad. Okay, they're not the Nazis. They're not that bad. Okay, they are kind of Protestants who support contraception and sort of abortion, but they're not as bad as those guys. So let's build a bridge with them. We can work with them, right? So, but if we talk about these other issues, so let's not talk about them. So let's have a council where we say, let's focus on what's good in Protestantism or what's good in false religions, and then we'll be able to get along with them, and we'll be able to build consensus, and we'll be able to all join together and oppose atheism or oppose relativism. This is the danger. And so in doing that, you lose the war because you've built your consensus and you've lost the war because you're not getting to the heart of the matter. Look at what's happening in just on the issue of abortion. Right? How long has that been going on? Since the 1960s, been fighting that. All this not talking about the elephant in the room, about the sin of contraception, keeping that quiet. We haven't really achieved very much, right? Haven't achieved any, convinced many more people if you look at the numbers. Again, maybe we wouldn't have the majority either, but we at least would have spoken the whole truth if we weren't afraid to put it all out there. So the danger is falling into obscuring or hiding or glossing over very important fundamental principles of philosophy and theology to gain consensus. So what do these errors all result in on the practical level is often falling into the tactics of the revolution, right? The tactics of the revolution. So we often try to mimic or adapt their way of acting, of graphic placards, of big rallies, chanting, of, again, appeals to emotion, whipping people up. Again, there's nothing wrong with people coming together to express a collective opinion. It happened all throughout the age of faith. People did that. They came, spoke to their local bishop or their local secular ruler. Here's the problem. But it's about the tactics of the revolution. How did the French Revolution unfold? Right? Through inciting public emotional reactions, right? Through these liberal tactics, right? And so we always have to be on guard against the weapons we're using. Are they the weapons of the enemy? Are they things that appeal to truth as being subjective, appeal to emotions, appeal to building majorities, building consensus, or do they fall back on the whole truth? So these are these dangers that we can fall into by adopting these. So when we're actually thinking we're working for these good causes, we're perpetuating these principles of the revolution, to put it in a simple word. Right? Again, petition drives. Right? Petition drives. We want you to change this because you'll be afraid you'll be voted out of office. As opposed to we're just collectively coming to tell you in one voice what the truth is. So to be careful about how we use these and how we can fall into these traps of spreading the underlying philosophy. Why is it we have to be careful? Because of where we're building, where we're doing this. Again, is where I started. We live in a modernist liberal age. Cardinal Madrigada of Honduras, the right-hand man of the Pope. He's the force behind his Politburo of cardinals he's put together. Right? He said last year, 2 public speeches in this country, at Vatican II, modernism finally won. He said it outright. Again, I love him, like John said he loves Casper, because he said it. He said, modernism was defeated in Pascendi, paraphrasing, but at Vatican II it won. Right? That's the environment we're in, where modernist way of thinking, right, has conquered the church. Right? Has conquered, and I say that in quotes, right, because the church is still there, but has conquered the appearance of the church in the world. And the way of thinking, the way of approaching issues, the way of understanding truth, the way of understanding the nature of reality, it's penetrating all of us. And we are not facing reality if we think we're somehow immune from it. Right? Oh, Cardinal Madrigadas, the Casper, all the bad modernists over there. Right? We're not like them. But they are the ruling zeitgeist that we live in. And it's that way of thinking, we always have to be on guard. Right? And again, to take this a much better way than I've done it, I've talked on a very natural level, but a book I can't recommend enough is Dom Chotard's The Soul of the Apostolate. This is the fundamental message of his book, which was the favorite book of Pope St. Pius X. He kept it on his nightstand. He said, even if you're working for the right Catholic cause, you have to constantly keep looking inward and keeping a check. Because when you're engaging the enemy in the revolution, the dangers are going to seep into you. And that's why the soul of the apostolate needs to be preserved. And again, in a much more spiritual, supernatural realm, he discusses that than I've done here today. That's right. Anybody, you can't do any Catholic action without reading that book and making it part of you. Because we cannot keep facing the enemy. We have to remember and keep our own house in order. As our Lord said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Errors in the beginning, errors in philosophy and ways of thinking produce big errors in the end. So thank you for your attention today. I hope I've given you some bit to think about. Maybe I'll just end to wake you up with a short joke to bring this into relief. And I'm Irish, so as you know, Irish are the only people that can tell jokes about the Irish. So this has all been about how we're blurring the distinction between ourselves and the enemies and projecting their errors onto us. So here's the story. So Patty's feeling a bit under the weather, you know. So he goes to the doctor. He says, doctor, I'm feeling terrible. Oh, what's wrong with me, doc? The doctor looks him over, checks him, runs. Says, Patty, I just can't tell what's wrong with you. I think it must be the drink. And Patty says, I understand, doc. I'll come back when you're sober. So we don't want to project the ailment of the other on ourselves. All right, thank you for your attention. Have a good afternoon.
In the final vision on October 13, 1917, Our Lady silently held out the scapular, a gesture which indicates that she wants everyone to wear it.